Hi everyone, Rennie here. We love drawing from reference over here at Screen Tones, and this episode is sponsored by the amazing pose reference team at adorkastock.com. They are running the Adorkastock and Friends group poses for artists campaign over on BackerKit to make some absolutely epic looking group shots to help all of us get just the right pose for our illustrations, webcomics, or just study and level up our drawing skills. Help them make it happen over at adorkastock.com/group. Enjoy the episode.
Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Hello, and welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk anything and everything webcomics. Today, we're going to be talking about creative burnout, what it is, how to recognize it, and maybe some advice about dealing with it and trying to prevent it. I am Delphina. I use she, her pronouns, and I make the webcomic Somnolus.
I'm Finn, I use they them pronouns, and I make the webcomic Heirs of the Veil.
And I'm Rae. I use they them pronouns, and I do the webcomics on Empyrean High and Overlord of Ravenfell.
So, burnout is kind of the accumulation of unchecked and built up chronic stress over a period of time. And it takes some interesting forms that you might not expect. It can come from other places in your life or from the making of the comic itself, but preventing it from creeping up on you in the great marathon of webcomics is pretty critical to keeping healthy and happy. So let's talk about our experiences. I just wanted to kind of go into what's the difference between burnout and just being tired or stressed in your experience?
Well, in my experience, I would say first thing, burnout is literally like a medical condition. So it is something that you cannot easily come back from. Like, when you're just tired, you can take some time off, you can just recover somewhat. And if you're actually experiencing burnout, even taking time off won't often be enough to actually go into like a recovered state. And if you're like hitting it really bad, you probably have to take like more measures to get better again. So it's something that's way more severe and will probably stick with you way, way longer than just the occasional tired period.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's stress is temporary. Like it's you have like a you can take a little break or you can take a hiatus or something like that and kind of feel better after like a stressful day or period of your life. But yeah, burnout is a little more long term. What do you think, Rae?
For me, I'll still get ideas even if I'm tired or too tired to even work on them. For burnout, it's also like a lack of inspiration and even will to work on art. I find that it often stems for me, from a accumulation of stressors, both long term and short term. It's often something that you can't really do anything about for the stressors. So it's really hard to deal with because you can't often see a way out.
Yeah, I think that's pretty critical that there's low engagement, low emotions, you're just not feeling anything because you've kind of taught your body over the course of time that something that requires creative or emotional energy is bad for it. So your body is kind of rewiring all your brain waves and stuff. It's disengaging for you like preemptively and saying, nope, you don't have access to that brain power right now, is what I see from people. And I also feel like sometimes it can be hard to tell it apart from like clinical depression because it has a lot of those same feelings of helplessness and there's no end in sight. Why should I bother? Depression is something that you can actually like get medication for and professional medical help. So like Finn was saying, one way to tell is that if you were burnt out, like you'd feel okay maybe when you pull yourself out of that environment, but when you put yourself back into the conditions of what's causing you stress, like it all comes right back. In a depressive state, maybe like it would just be a constant, it doesn't matter where you are, you're still going to feel like crap because the chemical imbalance in your brain is still there. But like they kind of run parallel, but there is a small difference. And yeah, it's tricky, especially trying to figure out what the cause of it is sometimes. I mean, it can be weird.
Yeah, I think it would also be important to note that if you're suffering burnout and you're not doing anything about it, or you can't do anything about it, that's also something that can lead to depression. So, burnout is something that if you don't have the ability to actually, I don't know, counteract it in any way, you can do lasting damage to your own psyche, to yourself. I mean, we're all not like medical professionals, but I think all of us have dealt with our fair share of these troubles. And I feel when I'm like going into artistic burnout, the point where I feel that I've like hit that break and I have to change something, and I might need to go into like a longer phase of rest, maybe get some professional help, is when like the mere thought of like taking up a pencil and drawing is like, it feels so exhausting to the point that it paralyzes you and that you can't even do anything anymore. And then you like go down the spiral where it's like, okay, I shouldn't be that exhausted actually. I don't have a right to be that exhausted. Why can't I do that? And maybe you try to push yourself even harder and you go like into the spiral where just making it worse because you're not allowing yourself to take that step back and maybe take that prolonged break.
Absolutely. And I feel like it can require a little reflection because like sometimes it's related to your comic, sometimes it's not related to your comic at all. And this is where, to your point, professional help like a therapist could actually really help you. Um, because if it's related to your friends and family, it's nice to be able to talk to your friends and family, but a lot of situations where they might be contributing to your burnout and it's going to cause drama if you bring it up. Or you're caring for children or your parents, or you have a relationship dynamic that is causing burnout or work or school, and having that neutral professional with experience in navigating those long-term life conditions in a healthy, constructive way, that's a massively helpful tool. Because obviously if you have a kid, for example, you can't just get rid of your kid and say my burnout is gone. But you have to figure out probably how to get more help and more breaks long term. But that's all something that a professional will have a lot more experience navigating than me. Yeah. But sometimes it is actually related to art or making comics. We put a lot of stress on ourselves, and a lot of pressure sometimes. To your point, that yeah, it can just spiral. You can start thinking about all the ways that you're not doing what you used to be able to do, and that sucks. And um but there are ways to kind of be kinder to yourself and kind of reframe the work that I think are important to explore.
Absolutely. I also think that right now we also need to consider like the environment in comics, that we are in like a comics environment where we are kind of pushed to like work harder, put out more, because there's so much competition and like such a big call for professionalism, even if you're just a hobbyist. But I think that this also like ties into our next question, which is, do you have dealt with artistic burnout before? And if yes, what are maybe some things that helped you realize that you are dealing with burnout? And also, how did you get through it? What were things that helped you in that process?
Well, I'll jump in because I have a problem with pacing and sometimes running out of buffer. And if I'm running like rushing to get a page out every week, or like twice a week to meet my schedule, which is the schedule that I like to do, that pace can wear me out so fast because you just don't have a buffer. You don't have any kind of time. And when as soon as you finish a page, you're like having to work on the next one right away. And you can't keep pushing yourself like that. That's just not sustainable. And whenever I find myself in that pattern, and it's happened quite a bit in the, 14 years that I've been doing comics, it's just like I need to take a step back. I need to, maybe work more breaks into my schedule, reduce my schedule. Sometimes I cut it in half and I only do one page a week. But you could even go lighter than that. I schedule hiatuses in between chapters, and I just try to keep that buffer and keep it going. Last year, I think it was the worst because I wore myself down a lot trying to keep up my buffer. And I cut my schedule in half for pretty much 6 months and took December off completely to rebuild my buffer. And that was a good balance because sometimes I feel like if I just stop cold turkey, then I'm letting people down and the guilt starts building up. So at least I could say, well, I am still making progress. It's not exactly the speed I want, but it's still happening. And this year I'm back to my normal schedule. I'm back to 2 pages a week. But I'm taking one update a month off every month, whether I need it or not. And just knowing that I have a little break every month kind of counteracts that feeling of there's no end in sight. I can't, I'm never going to catch up. Because, yeah, that's going to wear me down. I think another one that gets me, and I hear about a lot from some of my friends, is the financial anxiety. Like if you're trying to desperately make money with your webcomic, and maybe you've got a Patreon and you're trying to like figure out what do my patrons want? What am I going to get more patrons? You're watching your subscription numbers fluctuate. That financial stress can wear on you over time too. And it's a lot of energy trying to put out things that people might not react to, because especially in the context of Patreon, people are a lot of times they're not for the rewards. And that's hard. That's like, well, how do I get more people if I don't offer them something new? If they're just treating it as a tip jar, maybe like the people I have there, that's all I'm ever going to get. Like that's just all contingent on whether they can afford to continue putting dollars in my tip jar this month or something. It's a big trap. And again, it just wears on you over time. I think the thing for financial anxiety is just don't put yourself in a position where one platform is your only or primary source of income. Because as we've seen, and we will continue to see, platforms are tools that can get really unusable really fast, and one weird CEO can ruin algorithms and visibility for you like that. So keep your eyes open for other things so you don't get stuck in a rut. And I just try to experiment. I treat it as a big experiment, and I experiment at conventions, and I do crowdfunding on Kickstarter, and that I've done itch.io bundles with other groups, and that all of those kind of lead to little new avenues. So even if each one is only making a little bit of money, all of my eggs aren't in one basket, and that kind of eases the stress for me from staring at my Patreon numbers, if that makes sense.
Totally. I also think I like your point about not quitting cold turkey when you have to take a break, because I feel that if you just stop, it can get even harder to then take up the pencil again and continue with the comic. So I think it's like a good idea if you can rest, but still be able to draw occasionally and keep going, like maybe in a way slower pace, or maybe while you don't have like constant updates looming in the back. Yeah, what about you, Ray?
For me, my burnout, I think the first time I had like really intense burnout, it was because of my comic, because it was a collaboration with some of these other people, and we ended up having a falling out, and it got really hard to work on that comic. I did end up shelving that one just because I knew that it probably wasn't going to go away, because I had actually tried to reboot it, and that didn't go the way I planned. But so sometimes you do need to consider if it's even something that you are interested in doing, or if it was something that you have outgrown. The second time, though, was also due to external factors, but mostly I was pretty much overworking myself. I was working overtime every week, and also going to school full time. So what wasn't spent on my homework, I tried to do a comic, and that was not working out at all. I have found that some strategies have worked for me, like I'll change up where I'm working or clean up my art space. I'll often look at both the things that inspired me to make my comics in the first place, as well as going out of my way to find new inspirations, new arts, in the form of books, video games, comics, shows, or even just going out of my way to find new artists that I admire. I'll also try to go back to the basics and look at new tutorials and books on techniques, or experiment with new tools. Can often give me like the motivation to work on my art, even if it's in a different way, because webcomics are constantly evolving art, and that's one of the charms of the medium. But if you feel like you still need to work on your comic rather than taking a hiatus, I also try to work more on the less creative aspects of my comic to still even get some things done, and trying to like turn it into piecemeal, and like a production line can help me continue working on my comic, even if I don't necessarily feel like it. Like, I'll often just lay out all the panels all at once if I don't have the brain space to do anything more. And then will find that I have 20 pages where I just need to draw in the panels, and that can sometimes help me uh, get that push to actually get those pages done. But ultimately, I do find the best thing is if it's an external stressor, it's best to try to eliminate that source as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like too, um, like when you work in batches like that, and you maybe get all your sketches done or something like that, you might like knock out the jobs that are causing you the most stress all at once, so it's done for a while and you have time to kind of focus and recover with the parts that you actually do enjoy. Or when you come back to it, you're not staring at a completely blank page. That's always nice too.
I also feel that it takes away a bit of the stress of like getting something done by update day, because while that can get you a kick in the rear sometimes to get things done, sometimes it can just be a stressor in and of itself.
Yeah, I also feel like when you there's tasks that you could just eliminate altogether. I feel like we have this anxiety about like maybe having the perfect art, or doing things that is like illustration quality, but taking the time to do messier or looser styles, and like maybe work on some timed speed drawing exercises to be more gestural, or kind of like skip some of the steps, because we're all doing this for free. We're all doing these comics, and like there's no standard that we necessarily have to meet. And sometimes it's good to remember that, like, even if you're comparing yourself to other people, that everything you do is still good.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, it can be like hard to give ourselves that kindness and to actually be like, okay, I need to take this break now. I need to maybe step back from the comic. And it's like, it depends what you want to do, how you feel the best. But in the end, I feel there's always this like looming dread to fall out of relevancy, to not update the comic enough. And if you don't update the comic enough, then your readers might not return when you eventually return, because there's so much else out there. And I think that um for me personally, a lot that has led me to feel burnt out on my work, or burnout in general, with art, is kind of the expectation to constantly provide and do art and be um kind of just be there in these spaces and act in these spaces and connect with people. And while I think that this is something that has become more severe, especially with how younger artists are now introduced into like comic spaces, especially webcomic spaces, I think it's something that has been like going on for a long time. So something that I remembered when we were preparing for this episode was actually like the first book for drawing manga that I ever owned. And it was actually like a Japanese book. And I don't know when it was published, but I was probably like 13 or 14 when I got it. So it was ages ago. And the book basically started with how hard it is to be a mangaka, and that if you want to like break through in the industry, in the comic industry, in the manga industry, that you have to deal with exerting yourself, that you have to deal with pulling all-nighters, that you have to deal with just throwing your own health away for the art that you're doing. And
That's terrible.
like a lot of stuff, yeah, basically. But the thing is, like, a lot of stuff kinda was like that. And like I've been reading how many pages like my favorite manga artists were doing, and nobody was talking about assistance. So I didn't even know that was a thing. Um, but also like in the German manga industry, a lot of like pretty young people. I think the youngest person I know of that got her work published, she was like 16 at the time, and they were basically doing the same. And all the spaces that I've interacted with when I was a kid were basically like, yeah, this is how you have to do it, because if you don't work constantly, you probably won't you won't be making it. Also, I think for me there's this thing, transitioning from like childhood to adulthood. Like when you were a teen, you had a lot more time to constantly draw, and then you're an adult and you have adult responsibilities. You will have less time. There will be less like brain focus that you have to actually go to your art. So there will be like, you won't be as productive as you've used to be. And I think this is also something that can contribute to you feeling like you're failing, and then you're trying to work even harder to be as productive again. Because like when I was a teen, I like drew 20 pages a
Me
night
too.
sometimes. They weren't yeah, they
No.
weren't very good, but it was still super productive. And now like I'm happy if I can maybe sketch 3 pages a night. And that's already a lot for me. So
Yeah, you also have to realize that, I mean, you also grow as an artist, and sometimes, unfortunately, that also means that you're taking a hit on time and taking longer on each page.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes we don't really realize that because I think in the beginning, Delphi mentioned that when you deal with burnout, an important thing is also that you reflect on yourself, on your own behaviors, on what you're doing, what is leading to that. And I think a lot of people, they just don't reflect. So there's like this one image that they had of themselves when they were younger, like tinted in nostalgia or whatever, and then the artists they are now, and they cannot compete with their teen self. But it's also like the art scene is just getting more and more competitive, so you kind of feel like you have to perform, you have to put things out, you have to network. And I think that's also like an important thing, that artistic burnout doesn't necessarily just have to be about like the art and your art process, but also maybe about not being able to feel connected to your peers and to feel like you're failing at networking with them, getting into the spaces that might get you ahead, and stuff like that. So I think there's like so much for webcomic artists that basically like ball together and lead eventually to this absolute exhaustion.
That's such a good point too about the exhaustion, because I feel like there's a lot of people who are putting in a lot of work and not feeling like they're getting like the audience or the growth or the fan response, and they're not connecting to their artist peers either, so like they're not kind of getting any kind of recognition for their work. And it, you shouldn't necessarily have to work for recognition from, you know, external validation and stuff like that. There should be a story that you want to tell no matter what. But we all kind of do want to post our stuff and like have a difference, you know, make sure it's like making a difference to somebody. So I feel like just reaching out to the extent that you can, joining communities or small friend groups, depending on what you have the energy for, and engaging with others' work and cross promoting, or you know maybe just joining co-working groups, can be a really big way to be seen, feel like you're like there and being observed in some way, even if other peers aren't your readers. I think that can be pretty critical.
It also gives you a sense that you're kind of all in it together too. I think is an important aspect of artist groups. So it's like even if they aren't reading your work and only like kind of adjacently see it, that there's still that sort of solidarity there to know that you're not alone and you don't have like you're not the only one that's going through this either.
Yeah, that's like such a good point, because that solidarity I think is so important, because like as artists we're kind of islands. Like we take a lot of time like working for ourselves and just being in our own heads, and being able to like kind of get out and to connect to others and see, okay, I'm not the only one struggling with this. Because like when you're on your own, it's so easy to just like look at social media and be like, okay, this artist is so successful, everyone is so successful, why can't I do it, why am I the only one who struggles? And I think that can enhance these negative feelings that can ultimately culminate in like working towards a burnout. So maybe like recognizing, okay, maybe I should look for spaces, maybe I should look for like support. And I mean like it kind of it's kind of like group therapy in in a very like I don't know, I mean not really, but it kind of is, because you connect to other people who have like the same struggles as you, and like carrying these things together and connecting with them over these struggles makes it easier to deal with it yourself. So I think like avoiding burnout in like the artistic field, getting out of this isolation is like a very important point.
Yeah, I definitely agree that like the group thing, because the grass is greener on the other side when you compare yourself to more popular comics. And I know people who like they get nice comments or they get, some people some likes or whatever, but it's not as many likes as that guy. And so it can feel very competitive until you get in another space with another artist and you just like realize that you're on the same side. You're all, you know, in this together. And other artists, we look at art and we do art all the time. So I think we're also just a little better at like recognizing what each other's strengths are. So it can be good to have, people who appreciate the good qualities of what you're doing, and just appreciate what you have, because there's always going to be somebody who has more likes than you. There's always going to be somebody who has more followers than you. You can't let that get to you. um, and it doesn't mean that your stuff is bad or not worthy or whatever, because chances are there's people who like it. There's people who are appreciating it, and keeping those experiences at the forefront of your mind, and doing whatever you can, maybe copying them into a journal, or just enjoying what you've done, and how much your art has grown since you started. Those can all be really fulfilling things that keep you going.
I do also think that a lot of people, when they're scrolling through social media, they're the outside looking in. They're only seeing the polished work that other people are doing, and they don't see the struggles that that individual artist might be going through. So you also have to keep that in mind, is you're seeing the finished product, you're not seeing the blood, sweat, tears, and maybe even they're going through burnout themselves type of thing. So joining the artist spaces, it can also put that a bit into perspective, especially if you get an artist that you might see as one of those, oh my god, they're so much better than me. They're probably making all this money. And then you find out, oh, hey, they're not actually making any money on this, even with all the comments that they're getting or something like that.
I can't
So
pay for groceries with comments. What is this?
I wish comments would pay my bills, but it doesn't.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be like super honest here. Like I've been in that place when I looked at like, I don't know, social media, at my artist peers, and been like super disgruntled because I've been in a bad headspace and was like, yeah, why are they doing so much better than I? Why can't I have what they have? And it's basically like it's so easy to get in that spiral and to make everything worse, and so hard to basically just go to them and recognize that they struggle too. Like, you're not the only one who's tired. You're probably not the only one who's dealing with like feelings of burnout. And maybe having a support group can be helpful also in like calling you out and telling you, hey, maybe if you're like doing so badly, maybe if you like hate everything like right now, like you hate drawing, you hate your comic, you hate your peers, maybe take a step back, take a break, do something else, and then come back when your feelings have cleared up and you're doing better, and you're not like clouded by that exhaustion and these like misanthropic feelings that can just like swallow you when you're in that space.
Yeah, someone to reel you in and tell you to eat a sandwich. Sandwiches are healthy.
Yeah, it's always good to make sure you're fed and hydrated. I think I saw something where it's like, if you hate everyone, eat something. If you hate yourself, drink something. So you might need to do both. Uh but overall, I do think that to avoid burnout, it's really good to have a healthy respect for other people's art too, and also study it and see if there's anything you want to take from it, because I've always found that experimentation is a really good way to get me out of burnout or even prevent it. So it's really good to both analyze yourself and others and see if there's anything in your process that you can change to maybe make things easier on you, especially if you find yourself hating drawing. You really need to find ways to make yourself enjoy it and keep enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, the preventing of burnout is definitely what you want to try to aim for instead of like actually falling into it, because once it's there, like it does rewire your brain, it does rewire chemicals, and you kind of have to take your time. It's like physical therapy. You have to do your exercises to rebuild what you had, and you don't want to get there. It's so I think the good news is that we do actually have quite a bit of control over the conditions in which we work, more so than a mangaka, more so that you might have a job with, a boss or customers. You can control how often you work. You can control what you work on and what like influences you. Nobody's gonna fire you for going too slow. If people get mad at you, they're you know they don't really matter, but most people won't. I think that most people who read free comics on the internet see and appreciate and understand there's a human behind the scenes. So just having that in mind can help you deal with the guilt of, well, I gotta keep going or else everything's gonna drop off the face of the earth.
I think, especially for younger artists, especially when you're just starting out, it's so important to maybe not treat it like a job. To be like, okay, this is my hobby. I do this because it's fun, because it's fulfilling to me, and not because I have to do it, not because I have to be popular, not because I have to make it my living. Because like that's kind of the trap that I fell into, and that led to me like suffering from like the consequences of my own actions, basically being like I have to work so hard, I have to basically treat it like it is a job and not like a hobby. This has to be my job, even if it's not paid. I have to work so hard, because if I don't do it, it won't be my job. I won't get anywhere with it if I don't do that. And the thing is, sometimes you still won't get anywhere no matter how hard you work. And that's just the reality. So I think it is just better to, from the beginning, just be like, okay, I'm just doing it because it's fun. I'm trying to do my best with it, but if I notice that it gets too much, that it's like affecting me in bad ways, that it's affecting my mental health, I should be able to take a step back. Maybe also be able to be like, okay, I have to take a prolonged break from drawing. I have to retreat a little bit from social media. Because sometimes you just need to like rejuvenate your juices. I think Ray made some really good points about like doing something completely different art wise, making studies, not drawing the comic, but like doing studies, trying out a new medium or whatever. And that can actually help you while you like try to recover, or while you try to avoid burnout. Because I think like it's healthy for all of us to take prolonged breaks if we can.
Yeah, just give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to like meet yourself at like the energy level that you are, because I feel like it can get really out of hand, especially to our previous points about like, yeah, we did have a lot of energy as kids. We did have a lot of focus because we had a lot fewer responsibilities. But you don't have to you're going to be changing like year after year. Your life is going to have all kinds of things happen to it, so it's kind of silly to think that we'll always be the same artistically either. So just meet yourself where you're at and just experiment with what you have the energy to do. We like to talk about hats here. If you're a solo creator wearing a million hats, the energy of writing and inking and coloring and promoting long term, that can be a lot. And that expenditure of energy can wear on you over time. So just don't put so much pressure on yourself to maybe do some brainstorming about like how do we make this easier for ourselves.
Yeah, and also like don't fall in the trap of this won't happen to me, because I know so many people that are basically like, oh no, this won't happen to me. Everyone is saying that if I keep doing this, this will happen to me, but it won't happen because I'm different, because I'm special. And I think we've all have felt this way before, like we're like special and this can never happen to us. We're going to be okay. But in the end, please like listen to your webcomic elders when they say, don't strain your hand and don't strain your brain. Take breaks, because it will happen to you if you don't look after yourself.
Yeah, we always do need to remember that making webcomics, thanks to Webcomic Time, is a marathon and not a sprint. So you need to maintain your energy and maybe eliminate things from your processes that you don't actually enjoy, because once you don't enjoy something, that is pretty much the path to burnout right there.
That is the important thing, listening to your webcomic elders, because we've been there and you don't want to be there. So stay happy, stay healthy. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a chicken Caesar salad wrap today. So thank you so much for listening. That wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for listening. I've been your host, Delphina, and you can check out my comic Zombulus at zombulus.com.
I've been Finn, and you can check out my comic at heirsoftheveil.com.
And I am Rae, and you can check out On Empyrean High at empyreancomic.com and Overlord of Ravenfell on Webtoon.
I'm gonna go get some water and snacks because I don't want to burn out. Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. We are supported in part by the fantastic folks at Hiveworks, home of many amazing independent webcomics. Check out their store at hivemill.com to find ebooks and print books of many fine Hiveworks titles. We're also supported by, listeners like you over on Ko-fi. Drop us a few bucks if you enjoy what we do and want to help us continue talking about anything and everything webcomics. And don't forget to give us a follow on Blue Sky and Tumblr so you don't miss an episode. You can find links to all of those at screentonescast.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.